Now, before we're even able to dive into this, Aurora told Brian that she overheard Toretti and Axel yelling at each other. And Toretti mentioned something after we fire Brian. So you got to understand from Brian's perspective, right? That every action Brian has taken has come from a higher stage in the chain of command. From MCU being a part of the commissioner's office and only responding to the commissioner, to keeping the operation a secret on Sanguine, to then sort of to compiling the evidence and submitting it through Crane to the Senate, to following those Senate orders, to doling out the punishments that were agreed to by a higher, stage in the chain. And then prior to the war, there was where are the receipts? And you got to understand from Brian's perspective, right? He seems like an asshole but from Brian's perspective, it's like the president of the United States or like the Senate IRL declaring war. And then the army general or those yeah, right? Saying, but we don't believe in the war. Right? Does that kind of make sense? So from Brian's perspective, it's just like, what the fuck is happening right now? But then also sort of having to navigate the waters of well, no, me and Axel didn't make all these decisions. We just have to work with what we are told. And that includes going to war in a couple days. That includes, because the original plan going up to it, if you were following the role play, was, but keep in mind, chat, this is Brian's perspective, right? I'm super down with the RP. Oh yeah, exactly. We took an oath to it. So inherently, when Brian's now being asked well, where are the receipts? And he's like, but half of y'all already know this. You probably weren't asking them. Why am I being asked as if I started this war? The original intent, as was discussed by Brian and Axel, was we're probably going to pitch getting a general in place, informing the city, and having a actual army. But instead, and it makes sense in roleplay too, the police force, EMS, whatever, responded to it. That decision was made. It is what it is. You could argue, of course, well, we didn't sign up for this, But ultimately, that was the decision made, and we won the war, right? And you can easily write that off as Senate looks at Los Santos, and this is the way that Brian's been describing it. Are you surprised? Los Santos is a failed state. We have gangs that run the city, and the United States Senate decided that they're not going to waste their resources. The PD's already pretty paramilitary as it is. Send it in, and they made the right choice. The PD won the war, right? Yeah, it's like Mexico. Yeah, that's actually a good point. It's like Mexico, exactly. So, sort of navigating the what ifs or whatever is sort of ignoring the obvious in Brian's mind. Now, fast forward, right? Now, Brian gets told this by Aurora, and this has been in the back of Brian effectively having to respond to individuals who are taking tweets as truth. Now, I want to be very clear about this. I'm only explaining it from Brian's perspective. I understand other perspectives in RP are valid, but, let's get back to where I am right now with Brian. There's certain conversations that I'm like, that are very difficult to navigate, and I'm trying to figure out like which one of those I want to bring into RP. And specifically, in Brian's mind, he mentioned how MCU was not desirable by all of High Command. And that happened in roleplay, right? But topics like that, I'm very hesitant to bringing in because they've sort of shaped the current stage. And in Brian's mind, the current reasons for some of these questions coming up to begin with. But at the same time, I'm like asking myself, do I want to do this? Should I be doing that in RP? Because I'm afraid of potential like toxicity surrounding it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, I don't want anyone to get like shit for Brian saying these things. So that's kind of been like an internal, like that's been a sort of a debate for some time where it's like, okay, well, the writing's on the wall. I don't think it's controversial. I don't think so either. I think like Brian, the character, is like validated in it, but I got to think about like the OOC aspect of it as well, right? Viewers can be pretty cringy when it comes to this. So, yeah, exactly. But they're like, you know. So that's why I brought that up. And there's other things that, you know, happen in roleplay. Ryan's like, okay, well, right now he's asking, why are the primary factors that brought this up before, like, inherently, they had a very selfish interest, and it mostly seems like they were looking for any other reason to get rid of it, right? So, okay, so Brian's now been told that effectively a decision's already made, that he's going to get fired. He's already done his job, but now we know that Divine appears to be acting under threat. So I'm not sure how to unpack that. I don't know how to unpack that. I've been looking for an individual that was tied with your department. Given the search is still ongoing, we're aware that it might be a few more days till we find the individual after this outfit got shot down and his crew went missing. Wait, what the fuck? Huh? Director Knight, we've been looking for an individual that was tied in with your department. Given the search is still ongoing, just be aware. Oh my god. Someone was left behind. Okay, so what is Brian going to do now? So I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. There's a couple options I don't want to say just due to... I don't want the meta going out because I think it could be really good RP. So one option is Brian can say, well, I've done the mission. I've saved... I've brought revenge to Bass. For Bass. We were right. It doesn't matter what anyone says. Brian completed what he did. And he can now retire. Right? But, and that's where Brian's mind was at when Aurora said they had already decided to fire him. Right? However, Divine is still a threat. And we believe he's got weapons. likely given to him by Trey and Jaeger. And Brian already knows that he's going to be targeting people. He also inherently, given historically the last 3 months, who can stop him? It's just like maybe 6 or so individuals that have enough of the historical information that if things are dissolved, it rip bozo, right? Now, we could argue, well, from an OC perspective, there might be someone else that takes the mantle, but in character, there's no reason for Brian to believe that, right? Given, you know, how much everyone's been ignoring everything in Brian's mind. So now the question is, can Brian retire? Can he give his put his badge in? But the thing is, Brian would never do that. Does Brian want to do it? Sure. Is he pissed? Absolutely. I don't know. Actually, I don't even know if Brian is mad. Because I don't think Brian has ever genuinely been mad other than people ignoring threats. So the next logical step would be that Brian goes to Aegis. And because when he kind of looks at the landscape here, right? Who is going to stop Divine? Who has the assets necessary to do it? I'm not saying this is the only option. I'm like thinking through it out loud. Because who else is going to stop him? Who has the closest moral compass? Who has the resources? And if MCU dissolves, what next? There's a third option, which is killing Jaeger himself. There is a fourth option, which is calling the senator. Because inherently, the chain of command is being broken. There's another option too. But I'm not going to say it yet. So I am trying to evaluate which option Brian would take. And I think I'm going to let the roleplay sort of decide that. This is all like new thoughts, right? So I don't know which of those Brian would take. I don't think he would give up. Because if he gave up, then what was the point of it anyways? I don't know. Brian would not burn it all down. That's counterintuitive. Strip club and coke, Brian wouldn't do that.